9. Eternal Relationships. We come back over and over again with our loved ones, reuniting in countless lifetimes. Our bodies change from incarnation to incarnation, but our souls are the same. When we recognize the other as one of our own beloved soulmates, the guilt of separation between us vanishes. We are reassured and comforted. Loneliness and despair disappear. We learn through our relationships, which present opportunities for giving and receiving love and for practicing patience, compassion, and charity. They are also tests, supplying us with feedback on whether or not we are learning these and other lessons. Are we patient and loving with each other, or are we fearful and frustrated? Our relationships provide the answers and point the way to spiritual growth. The following stories illustrate the bountiful treasures contained in our relationships and show us how we can reap these treasures to accelerate our progress. As we do so, we not only heal ourselves and our loved ones, but all the souls on earth. To see and appreciate the soul of others with whom you are in a relationship is a higher state of awareness. To see only their outer characteristics provides a limited and incomplete perspective. Their current personality, just like their current physical body, is a temporary manifestation. They have had many bodies and many personalities, but only one enduring soul, only one continuous spiritual essence. See this essence, and you will see the real person. You are in relationship with all other beings. The relationships may be brief, such as with the waiter in a restaurant, a sales clerk in a store, or another driver on the road. Each of these has had many lifetimes and therefore many personas. Each has had his or her own infancy, childhood, and adolescence in his or her current body. They have brought all these past life and current life elements into the present moment, the moment of relationship with you. If you can understand and appreciate the beauty and depth of their soul, all its history and spiritual experiences, your relationship with them will be much more meaningful and fulfilling. You will be in relationship with their soul. The Path of Thorns. A number of the regressions that I experienced at your weekend workshop in 2002 in Los Angeles led me to resolving a heartbreak that I had been dealing with for too long. I saw 3 different experiences, all with the same man, a man who had said to me in this life, "I have never felt for anyone what I feel for you. I have never been so comfortable or attracted to anyone else in my life. But you need to realize that just because we are soulmates does not mean that we will be getting married, because we will not." I had replied, "That's fine, as long as you realize that I will not be coming back around for you again." At the time, I wasn't sure why I said it, but I knew that I meant it. That special weekend, I had 3 regressions of our pasts together. In one, we were both the students of a druid, and we hand-fasted. But when the druid died, he ran from the marriage. In another, I was his younger brother. He had promised our parents, as we went off to war, that he would look after me. When we entered the city and were attacked by enemy soldiers, he ran off into the fray, leaving me alone by the gates, a very young and terrified boy. I was the first to die, an arrow through my throat and one to the chest. In the third life, I was once again a student of a druid, and he a warrior. He went off to war with my father. I went to the grove to learn the secrets of the trees. When I came back, the gate had been destroyed, the town was cinders, and my father's and lover's chariots were outside the walls. All my people were dead. I took the horses from the chariots and rode to the next town for safety. Those were 3 lives in which I saw him repeat his pattern. He loved me dearly, but he always left me alone with a broken promise. This life has been no different, and I knew I had come back for him for the last time. In the final regression, I sat in my garden on a bed, and I tried to get him to come take my hand. He looked at it and started to reach for it. He wanted to take it. But instead he screamed and ran off into the thorn bushes, using a scythe to try to hack his way through as he gathered scratches and cuts. I was sitting on the bed with my guide, a being from somewhere else, and I asked why he would try to break a path through thorns when I offered him a way out. I was told, "You can only make choices for yourself. You can offer to help others find their way, but it is their decision if they will accept your help. You cannot force them to accept, even if you are in the right. The choice to take the path set out for them must be theirs. If they are too afraid, then they will force a path as they will. You can do nothing about it, but mourn their loss and yours." Through my tears, I looked down and saw a spark inside me. "I'm pregnant?" I said, and my guide said, "Here only, not in your world." I didn't understand how that was possible, and so the guide explained. "What you see inside you is waiting to be born, but it isn't a child of you and a man. It is you as you can be if you do not turn from your path. That is you who is waiting to be born. The choice is yours to either embrace that child and watch it blossom and grow, or let it die as you too force your way through the brambles. Only you can make this choice, as only your beloved can make his." I chose to let it blossom and grow. And even though the path that I have taken has seemed harder at times than cutting through brambles and thorns, I know I made the right choice. I still get lost, I still forget, and I still need a hand to help me up when I fall. But I would rather take those offered hands than walk off in armor, letting no one in. Both Brian and Carol, and many of the people I've met through the workshops and professional training groups I have attended, have offered me helping hands, as I hope I have them. This has enriched my life, and hopefully I have in some way touched them as well. We all move through this life together. Faith Susan. Faith has picked the path of courage. Destiny leads us to the decision points, but then our free will selects which path to follow. Her lover has not chosen as courageously or as wisely as she. Before you are born, your soul plans the trajectory of the life that lies ahead. Who will the significant people in that life be, and when will you meet? Whom will you choose to be your parents? Will you be a teacher or an artist, or will you take on some other role? Destiny will place you in those particular circumstances. It will dictate that you encounter a certain person at a certain time and perhaps in a certain place. The people it arranges for you to meet are frequently the people with whom you have lived in a past life. There is karma together. They may even be your soulmates, pushing you on toward greater spiritual growth. Once you meet them, you then exercise your free will. Do you stay? Do you leave? Do you cut your own path through the thorns and brambles, or do you take the outstretched hand reaching forth to help you? You may choose to love them, to befriend them, to work with them, to marry them. Or you might reject them, arguing that they do not look the way you want them to, or have a different religion than you, or live in the wrong part of the world. These are your choices, and this is how you learn. Everything is part of a master plan for the soul's growth. The act of making such decisions sets off alternative futures, the future with those people, the future without them, and so on. This is where destiny and free will interact together, and this is where things become interesting. Advanced souls can point the way and illuminate the path, but they cannot decide for us. Ultimately, the path is an inner journey that we must all make ourselves. Faith's final regression was a metaphor about choosing wisely. Her spiritual guide presented a compelling explanation of the process. Reading Faith's story, I was instantly reminded of the messages that the Masters provided me through Catherine, the patient I described in Many Lives, Many Masters. Even the Masters could not make such decisions for us. We must learn and climb the spiritual steps ourselves. We must have faith. Prisoner of War. I know it's coming. he said breathlessly, a look of horror on his face. "It's getting closer now. I can hear the explosions." His jaw was rigid, his breathing rapid, his face constricted. "The problem is I can't see anything. We can't see over the tops of the ditches." His voice tensed even more. He was clearly getting agitated, the terror building. I knew that I had to act quickly before the experience overwhelmed him. "Let's go back to an earlier, happier time," I said in a gentle voice. "A time before these explosions started." John took a deep breath and exhaled, his grim countenance fading as he settled into the chair. Although his body was in my psychotherapy office in the 21st century in Austin, Texas, his mind was deep in a non-ordinary state of consciousness, and his awareness was somewhere in Bavaria, nearly 100 years ago, experiencing a prior lifetime. Long before I was a therapist, I was fascinated by the concept of reincarnation. As a boy, I often wondered who I might have been in another life. As an adult, I discovered the work of Dr. Brian Weiss through his best-selling book, Many Lives, Many Masters. In training directly under Dr. Weiss, I found him to be different from many other so-called spiritual teachers or workshop leaders. He refused to sensationalize the work, and wasn't afraid to talk about the limits of regression therapy or to remind people that regressions themselves were not proof, in a scientific sense, that reincarnation existed. He was, however, adamant that regression therapy could be profoundly healing. Why would someone want a past life regression? It is not enough for my clients to remember that they were a peasant in the Middle Ages. For the regression to be healing involves not only understanding the roots of a negative pattern or recurrent issue, which often arches over many lifetimes, but also an emotional release so that the clarity can be fully internalized. A successful scientist, John was curious about reincarnation, but he'd come to me for a past life regression specifically because he had a hard time connecting with others. He was in his 60s with thinning hair, a salt and pepper mustache, and piercing eyes. His wife told him that he could be cold and distant at times, and both his adult children were estranged from him. John's initial interaction with me had been respectful and courteous, but hardly warm. This guy would never make it as a greeter at Walmart, I thought to myself, as John curtly announced that he doubted that he could be hypnotized. I have regressed thousands of people, both individually and in groups, many of whom had insisted the same thing. While I do believe that people cannot be hypnotized against their will, I have come to believe that the vast majority of people can be hypnotized, to some degree, given enough time with a skilled clinician. I would guess that over 90% of my regression clients go deep enough on their first attempt to experience some past life memories. Bearing this in mind, I took steps to induce hypnosis slowly and gently with John, always reminding him that he could safely come out of it at any time if he wished. He gradually went deeper and deeper, following my instructions. Some 30 minutes after inducing the trance state, I gave John the suggestion to go to the events that led to his chronic emotional aloofness. His subconscious led him to an experience in World War I, when he was a buck private in the German army, deep in the hell of trench warfare. I was concerned that this incident might be confusing or initially overwhelming, hence my instructions to go back to an even earlier time, so that he might be able to put his battle experience in perspective. Following my lead, John described himself earlier in that incarnation as a teenager, growing up with 6 siblings in a middle-class family on a verdant farm. He fell in love with an attractive village maiden named Helga, and he saw himself going to her farmhouse to court her. "Truth is, I barely know her. We've kissed each other once or twice as I walked her home from church." He had a broad smile. "But I think I am in love and want to marry her. She comes from a good family, hard-working, salt-of-the-earth kind of people, like me." John volunteered for the army, to serve the fatherland, and because it was his only chance to get enough money to marry Helga. To my surprise, John told happy stories about life in boot camp. The comradeship of his fellow soldiers and his sergeant warmed his spirits. Some of them are smart, some are stupid, but they are all good men. Many are farmers, just like me, and we get one hot meal every day, he added, grinning with amazement. Apparently this was better treatment than he had expected. John continued on with stories of endless marches. "It's tiring, but not so bad, really. You can rest on one foot and then the other," he said, making what was doubtless a common joke of the time with a forced cheerfulness. "The problem is, you can't ever lie down and rest. You have to keep marching. You have to. You have to." He swallowed hard, fighting back his grief and weariness, ever the good soldier. With an abrupt chuckle, he shook off the intensity. "The men just kid about it, and we keep going." Under my direction, John moved ahead to his arrival at the trenches, where the intolerable waiting for the war began. "We know it's coming," he said ominously, "but we don't know when. We wait for days." I asked him how he passed the time. "We laugh and joke," he replied with a half-hearted smile. "But we don't ever talk about our families or girls back home. It would just be too painful, too personal. I think we're afraid that if we thought about it too much, we really might desert." At once, John became more animated. "It's here now," he said, his eyes darting beneath his closed eyelids. "It's here, and there's smoke and flashes, and I can't see anything." His breathing was rapid. Oh, God, we are just firing into the darkness. We don't even know what we're doing, and... He trailed off, his voice thick with emotion. I reminded him that these were memories, and that he couldn't be physically hurt by looking at them now in hypnosis. He was safe in my office. "It's okay," he said. "It's over now. I never felt any pain." He paused for a long moment, his face enigmatic. "I'm looking down at the battlefield. I must have left my body behind. There are bodies everywhere. All I can see is my leg." I suddenly realized what he meant by this statement. It wasn't that all he could see was his leg. All that was left was his leg. His brow knitted as the grief became palpable. "It's so sad. The guys were good guys. The Sarge was good." John's face became tense, his breathing labored. A tear crept out of his eye. "But if everyone is so good, how could this happen?" His voice was breaking. "How could this happen?" I sat in silence for several minutes, simply allowing him this cleansing emotional release. After a while, he heaved a sigh. "There's a light in the distance, on the horizon." I watched John. It was as though his face were bathed by a gentle glow. "It's quiet there. No smoke, no explosions," he said wistfully. "I think it's the sun. No, wait." He seemed puzzled. "No, it's brighter than the sun. All the smoke is going away." "See yourself going to the light," I whispered. John's expression softened, the horror of the carnage falling away as he found himself floating in a brilliant, sacred light. He was making contact with something eternal. A gentle, peaceful smile came over his face, his eyes moist with a different kind of tears. I asked him what he had learned from that lifetime. "I was loyal and hard-working in that life, and I still am in my current life. I saw the senselessness of war, but I also seemed to learn of its inevitability." This accounted for both several happy years in his current life, spent doing community volunteer work to make a difference, and also dropping out of college to enlist in the Vietnam War, because, as he put it, they were going to draft me anyway. Most important, John saw how, in both lifetimes, he had repressed his feelings and avoided the feelings of others. "I learned not to feel, not to ask anything too personal about my comrades. In the trenches, It was rude and too painful to ask. It just hurt them, he said, the tears beginning again. But not now. I have to ask my kids and my wife how they are doing. His voice choked with regret. They aren't soldiers. They are people, and they want to tell me about their feelings. And I want to know. I want to know. I want to know. I gently placed a hand on his shoulder as he sobbed for a few minutes, and I realized that John was achieving a clarity in a single 3-hour session that might have taken months in traditional therapy. He had recognized that his habitual way of dealing with uncomfortable feelings by not discussing them, while appropriate with his comrades in wartime, could not work for him with his family. Until his regression, John was unconsciously driven by the echo from a past life to avoid discussing his feelings. As a therapist, I recognize that past life regression therapy is not a magic bullet that dramatically resolves all life issues in a single session. Still, in regressing thousands of people in workshops across the country, I have discovered the enormous healing potential in past life memories that run the gamut from traumatic to joyous. A woman remembers that her husband was her lover in another life and has been reunited with her now, and this awareness reinvigorates her marriage. A part-time artist commits her life to her craft when she remembers a lifetime in which she had great skill as a painter. A man with a 30-year phobia of doctors is cured once he remembers its roots in a tribal lifetime when a medicine man failed to heal him. All are different experiences. All are healing. Greg Unterberger. I am particularly pleased that Greg allowed and encouraged John to review the past life and its lessons, and to understand the connections to his present life. John had been treating family and friends as if they were soldiers, although clearly, in this life, they were not. In this kind of life review, the therapist guides the patient to extract and to understand the important themes and lessons of the lifetime that has just been remembered. When the patient experiences the death of his body in that past life memory, his consciousness becomes aware of floating above that body and entering a light-filled, serene spiritual state. That is when the therapist begins to conduct the life review, asking questions like, what were the lessons of the life that has just ended? After these lessons have been identified, the therapist may ask, and how do those lessons connect to the present life, to the present time? Recognizing these connections is often a key component of the healing process. It is not merely the reliving of the past life that is healing, but understanding and relating that life to the current one. A therapist will often conduct this kind of life review with the client during a past life regression session. But another type of life review happens to all of us when we die and our consciousness leaves the physical body at the end of each lifetime. This time it is not done with a therapist, but rather with our spiritual guides or other wise beings. It is not a clinical life review, but a karmic one. As we are replenished by the beautiful light, our awareness is directed to review the results of our actions while we were on the physical plane. We see the people we have harmed, and we feel their emotional reactions, magnified greatly. Similarly, we feel the emotions, again enhanced, of those we have aided and loved. In this manner we examine all our relationships, and we deeply experience all the anger, hurt, and despair that we have caused, but also all the gratitude, appreciation, love, and hope that we have elicited. This life review is not done in a spirit of punishment or guilt. By truly understanding the result of our behavior, we learn the importance of loving kindness and compassion. As the therapist, Greg, in the story that you have just heard, demonstrates the former type of life review. As the client, in the story that you are about to hear, he demonstrates the latter. Our souls, whether here or on the other side, are blessed with infinite opportunities for learning and growth. So many of us, like John, have died repeatedly in battle. We are born, die in another war, and reincarnate, only to fight and die again. At some point we will realize we are here to learn and to love. Whenever we kill another person, we also kill a part of ourselves. To be violent, to hate, and to kill are wrong. We fail the lesson, we have to repeat the course. At a deeper level, we can never really be killed because we are consciousness, we are soul. But in this physical dimension, we can die corporeally, and we must stop the violence. It is time to act like the spiritual beings that we truly are. An exploration of empathy. I trained with Brian in 1999 at Mount Madonna. I was a happy guinea pig on stage as he supervised a therapist who regressed me to a lifetime as a French monk in the 1600s. I had some mystic experiences during that lifetime, yet I sat on them for fear of what others might say. I had developed a relationship with a fellow monk, who was my first wife in my current incarnation, and spoke secretively of my experiences of God as someone who would never punish or condemn anyone. My fellow monk agreed, but refused to come out with me. Still, I was bolstered by his friendship, and I angrily confronted Father Francesco, who ran the monastery. He slapped me for being blasphemous and kicked me out of the order, arranged for my excommunication, and threw me out of the church. The monk who had befriended me stayed mute, paralyzed, and with the church, watching me leave as the bells tolled mournfully. This may account for, in part, why my ex-wife always was afraid that I would abandon her. Devastated, I tearfully and hopelessly climbed a nearby peak, getting colder and colder, and died alone, freezing to death in the snow, a de facto suicide. In an interesting twist, I spontaneously had a partial life review at the end of that on-stage session, in which I was shown alternative choices that I might have made, and how life would have gone had I made those choices. I could have approached Francesco more gently and caused, if not a revolution, an evolution in the monastery that focused more on God's mercy and love and less on hell and sin. This approach would have brought more people into the church and soothed many of the poor, who often believed their poverty was God's punishment for their sins. In a later regression, I intentionally reviewed Father Francesco's life. I was curious as to whether, under hypnosis, I could be directed to relive someone else's experience, and a fellow student successfully directed me there. I first saw Francesco beaten bloody by his own father as a child, and then I experienced his emotional torment directly as he writhed and cried out. Literally, his father believed that he could beat the hell out of his son, driving the demons out of him through pain. I was filled with compassion for my former enemy. Poor Francesco, understandably, grew up seeing himself as sinful and his heavenly Father as angry. He did unto others as was done unto him. Our spirits met, and I tearfully forgave Father Francesco as he apologized to me, saying he knew not what he did. Father Francesco returned in my present incarnation as my counseling supervisor, Frank, to be a much healthier mentor to me as a therapist. I returned to him as his ardent student for many years in this lifetime. Before I had the past life memory, one of the things that I confronted Frank about was that I felt that he didn't offer me enough emotional support. He replied that I was unteachable. We were both right, and well before the memory I became more open to Frank's coaching as he became gentler and more compassionate with me. He literally changed my life. We actually did your training together. Greg Unterberger. There are so many lessons to learn in this earth school, too many to learn in one life. Lessons of compassion, hope, faith, nonviolence, tolerance, charity, empathy, non-prejudice, and others can require many, many lifetimes. We are given countless opportunities to pay our debts to others and to repair our relationships with them. Greg and his supervisor were able to do both. We too can accomplish similar healing even with our most difficult partnerships. Love and forgiveness, augmented by understanding and patience, can fix all. Choosing this path of patience and kindness rewards us with incredible blessings. We do not choose this path for that reason, for the reward is in the doing. The blessings come anyway. Through empathy and insight, Greg and Frank could reunite and prosper. Their relationship reached a higher spiritual octave. Awareness means seeing from a more complete perspective. Greg provides a clear example of how this can lead to healing when he is able to see the beatings Francesco had to endure as a child. Now Greg could comprehend the connection to Francesco's behavior and values as an adult. With this comprehension, Greg let go of his own judgments and forgave Francesco. As an additional benefit, Greg's relationship with Frank, Francesco's current incarnation, was deepened. As you have previously heard on the subject of progression therapy, our future is not set in stone, not some fixed and unalterable pathway extending forward in time. It is a system of possibilities and probabilities, with some outcomes more liable to occur than others. One potential outcome, the probable future, is the most likely to happen, but it is certainly not guaranteed. Greg's description of alternative choices echoes these futuristic concepts. If, in the 1600s, he had chosen the more gentle and less confrontational approach, his life would have been dramatically different. His future lives, including his present incarnation as Greg, would also have been altered and improved. His relationship with Frank would have begun at a stronger and even healthier level. Ultimately, the time that it takes is unimportant, for progress is always being made. And with every step forward, the spiritual path becomes more clear. Cynthia's story, which also explores the importance of the student-teacher relationship, provides another moving account of love's timeless nature. A Soulmate's Return. I was privileged to be in one of your training seminars during the summer of 2010. By that time, I had read all of your books to date and was interested to share experiences with those of the same belief system that I had come to as a result of your writings. This belief system would include life as a never-ending cycle of evolution with those we love, who can teach us the most. I am 61 years old now, but I began to have a recurring dream when I was in my late 20s. In it, I was at Mount Vesuvius as a young woman of 19 or so, in love with a townsman with whom I was forbidden to associate due to cultural prohibitions. As the earth shook and the lava began to flow, I took refuge near the water, under a covering. A man ran into the same cavern. It was my beloved. Without any words, he held me close, and I had the knowing that he loved me also, even though it was not allowed. The dream ends there. No pain, no experience of death itself, just the deep understanding that the love I had felt in my heart was mutual. I have had this same dream every now and then for over 30 years. When I was introduced to your work, the dream's emotional intensity and vividness, as well as its repetitive nature, brought about the realization that this could have been an actual life experience within my soul memory. After reading more of your work, I pieced together the facts that applied to my present lifetime. At 14, I was sent away to parochial school, where I was instructed by a man whose voice I recognized like a bolt of lightning. We became friends, and I was his student for 4 years of high school. I continued my education and stayed in touch with him. I married another man, and my former teacher came to visit our family for about 12 years, when he was in good health. During these visits, my husband, daughter, and I entertained him and his friends and offered them a home in which to stay. On one visit, my husband and I discovered that our daughter was born exactly 50 years to the day as my teacher. There had always been a distant attraction for this man, although when I was so young I did not understand it or know what to do with this ancient memory. His voice was unmistakable. After studying with you and witnessing others' stories, I told him of this entire experience, relating to him that I believed I had known him in an ancient time. Not long after my revelation, he became very ill. I came to his aid, calling family members and checking on his care. His medications are now keeping him in balance, and he appreciates who I have become to him, a friend, mentor, and special advocate. Now I am in the role of teacher, and we have met once more. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that we are here again to support each other's joy and growth. I have also discovered through watching the History Channel that I lived in Herculaneum, a small town near Pompeii that was seriously affected by Vesuvius. Recently, a new discovery was made of several bodies found near the boat docks, the bodies of those who took refuge there, thinking they would be safe. Looking at the maps of the region shown and seeing the remains and where they were discovered, my soul knows that is where I fled and met up with this dear man whom I have loved for centuries. At your seminar, I recounted the same story under hypnosis. Today, this man and I enjoy a delightful relationship. I speak to him several times per week. He loves to hear of my daughter's progress as a young woman, and he and my husband have the utmost respect for each other. I feel peace and joy, knowing that we have eternity. Cynthia. The power of a volcano is no match for the power of a soulmate. The love of soulmates is not always romantic. It is eternal and unconditional. It transcends time and space, yet it can be the love of parent and child, of best friends, of siblings, of grandparents or cousins, or many other platonic forms. Perhaps your soulmate is a college professor with whom you take a course, whose passion and knowledge for the subject he is teaching influences your own professional trajectory. Once you finish the course, you move on, and so does he. Your work together in this lifetime has been completed. We have families of souls, rather than just one soulmate, and we are being connected all the time. Sometimes it is only for mere moments, yet even this brief amount of time can change one's life completely. Whether you are together for 10 minutes, 10 months, or 10 years is not as important as the lessons that are learned, the directions, and the reminders that occur when these encounters happen. There is a familiarity, a depth of knowing. You relate at a certain vibration that you wouldn't expect from such a short time. Soulmates come together again and again to interact. There is karma or destiny together. It is good to see how Cynthia and her teacher's soul relationship was so appreciated by the entire family, and absent of any jealousy, resentment, or fear. Unconditional love does not ask for anything in return. This pure love never creates dependencies or debts. It simply exists. An absolute energy, it never ends. It instantly connects lifetimes, centuries apart, and promises that all loved ones will be entwined throughout eternity. Witness how Carla, the author of the next story, translated this concept into action as she reached out to her sister with a love that outlasted both time and tension. Sisterly Bonds. Several years ago, I had the privilege of seeing you at Omega Institute in New York. It was the end of the day, and you had time to perform a childhood regression, for which I happily volunteered. I was hesitant to go up on stage and expose myself, but I knew that I was in good hands, and I trusted you. I was also curious to see what experience would show up. It did not take long before I had a memory in my mind. I was about 4 years old, and I was holding my 2-year-old sister's hand, helping her down the stairs on Easter morning. We were so excited. I remember the feeling of the carpet under my feet, of my pajamas. We made our way downstairs and found lots of Easter baskets waiting for us, along with a baby chick. I was a little nervous about the chick being eaten by one of our dogs, but truly it was quite a happy memory. As I was coming out of the hypnosis, I became emotional and started to cry. The audience asked why I was upset over such a pleasant memory. You see, at the time, that same sister and I were feuding and not speaking to each other, and all I could remember was that genuine, innocent love that I felt for her. I missed our close bond, which we had shared throughout most of our lives. The most important thing I took away from the whole process was that only love is real. So, after the weekend seminar was over, I contacted my sister and told her about the experience. We cried on the phone and started laughing, asking each other, "Whatever happened to that little baby chick?" The session with you brought my younger sister and me back together again. Today we still share that close bond. We both came to another seminar together and did some group regressions work, and we realized that we have shared many lifetimes in many different relationships. I will always cherish that regression that I did in front of the audience that day. It forever changed my life. Carla White. Such a powerful message is conveyed in Carla's brief account of her childhood memory. Love never ends. It never stops. Its energy is absolute, eternal. An innocent memory of the little sisters at ages 4 and 2 reminded Carla of the immediacy and importance of the bonds of love. The temporary feud seemed insignificant in comparison. A phone call was made, and the relationship was quickly repaired. Anger and hurt were forgiven. Carla's lesson applies to us all. How many passing fights, arguments, and misunderstandings are we allowing to rob us of the joy of loving interactions with the significant people in our lives? Our egos and our pride get in the way. Do we have the courage to pick up the phone and heal our relationships, as Carla did? Love transcends everything else. The British Pub. My husband and I were at the Being Fearless conference in New York City. After the second regression, we awoke and asked each other what we had seen. I mentioned that I was in a pub. He responded, "A British pub in the 1800s?" Yes. In a nutshell, he was outside a British pub in the 1800s, but could not go in. He could only look through the windows. He described the inside furnishings, but there were no people. The pub was exactly like the one I was in during my regression, but in mine I was a barmaid, possibly also a prostitute, and he had strangled me to death. We are now divorcing, although not because of this regression. I was reading one of Dr. Weiss's books at a ball game this summer, and a friend asked about it. I told him of the regression and of being murdered in the pub. He gasped and reminded me that my ex-husband and I owned a Victorian house from 1887 in Connecticut, and that the only room my husband had wanted to redesign was the bar room. For some strange reason, I had never put the two things together, but my friend was exactly right. My husband had redone the entire room in the theme of a British pub, complete with a mahogany bar and a British bulldog dart room. Bonnie. Simultaneous recall of the same past life scenes is a validation of the memory. So is the subconscious recreation of the actual setting. But there was no violence this time around. Much progress has been made. Soul relationships are not always harmonious and peaceful. Even soulmates can prove toxic if one soul is not as developed or evolved as the other. Bonnie's account of her past life demonstrates this concept, and the following story provides an additional example. Trust and Deception. I trained with Dr. Weiss for a week in New York in 2009, and now I work in Australia using past life regression. I love this method, and my dream is to make it available to mainstream people who suffer in many areas that could so easily be sorted out, leaving them free to get on with their lives. I met a wonderful lady in Sydney, Australia during a facilitator training class that I held the following year. Her case may raise awareness as to why so many women struggle to get pregnant or are judged for choosing not to have children. Charlotte was the first person to agree to come up and be regressed in front of the class. Her experience began as she saw herself standing on cobblestones with many shops around her. She was a grubby girl of about 11 years old, wearing a dirty dress and apron. This was in England in 1845. I asked her to go to her home, but she couldn't. Her home was the streets. Charlotte could not sense any parents. She went back even further in time to when she was 5 years old, when an accident had claimed the lives of both her parents, leaving her an orphan. The orphanage was cold and lonely. She had a friend there, a younger girl of about 4 years old named Sally, whom she recognized as her best friend in her current life. The girls took care of each other. As the regression proceeded, Charlotte saw herself at 19 years old and stated that she was in love with a man whom she recognized as her ex-husband in her current life. Pregnant with his child, she was so happy and believed that he loved her very much. An incredible sadness soon washed over her, and she started crying, "He took my baby! He took my baby!" She could only repeat those words over and over as she continued sobbing. The man whom she had loved was married and well-to-do, and his wife was barren. Because his wife could not have children, he set Charlotte up, and then took her healthy baby. I directed her to go to the time that she next saw her son. She easily moved ahead, seeing him as a 20-year-old man, very handsome and impeccably dressed, and coming out of what appeared to be a government building, with large pillars in front. Seeing him took her breath away. He was beautiful, and she was so proud. She then saw his father, and, as he knew her, his mother walking behind him. Charlotte did not want to speak to him. She was so ashamed of her appearance, but she felt happy knowing that he had a life that she could never have given him. Moving forward to her last day, Charlotte saw herself as old in appearance, but not in age. She died on the street where she had lived. Her lesson from that life was not to be so trusting of people. In her current lifetime, Charlotte does not have children. She also told me that later that same evening she had called her best friend, Sally from the orphanage, who lived in the United Kingdom, to relay the story. To her absolute surprise, when she was describing the part of her life where her baby had been stolen, her friend said, "That's because his wife couldn't have children." "What made you say that?" Charlotte had asked her. "I don't know," the friend had replied, "and yet I just knew." Tony Riley. Fear of losing a child again, in this or any other manner, can lead to the conscious or subconscious decision not to get pregnant. Was Charlotte repaying a karmic debt from an even earlier incarnation? We do not know. But her lover in that life and his wife, if she knew of his plan, will certainly owe her a debt in future lives. There is no escaping our debts and obligations. We must make it up to those people whom we have harmed in previous lifetimes. As we do, and as we practice kindness and compassion for all other beings, we progress rapidly on our spiritual path. Our vibration is elevated. There were many opportunities for love and empathy to be expressed in Charlotte's 19th century lifetime. Her lover in that life could have been much more generous and caring. The orphanage could have been more supportive, more nurturing, and not so cold and lonely. Society could have been more charitable, so that this trusting woman would not have to live and die on the streets. Only Sally seemed to be understanding and considerate. Our present world has not changed that much. Goodwill, altruism, and loving kindness must become more universal virtues and be extended to all people. When this happens, Charlotte and the rest of us will be able to safely trust humanity at a much deeper level. Charlotte and her lover were presented with several meetings to resolve their karma and to treat each other as spiritual beings should. Judy, the author of the next story, was likewise blessed with numerous occasions to develop a relationship with her soulmate. She met Patrick many times in her present life, and she will continue to meet him many more. Wish you were here. When I was in middle school, I was sitting on the front steps to my porch in Springfield when a boy from my neighborhood walked up the street with his friend Patrick. Patrick immediately came over, sat down next to me, and started to talk. He was so cute and seemed to really enjoy talking to me. I remember asking what his name was, but I didn't understand what he said. I asked him to spell it, and he spelled it with an apostrophe after a part that didn't make sense to me. From what I recall, it was P''Draig. I asked him where the vowel was, and he just smiled. My friend came down saying that Patrick's parents were coming to get him. He hadn't wanted to leave, but he could not stay because there had been trouble with his father before. Later I heard that he had been beaten by his father. After he left, I asked a neighbor about Patrick's name, and she said he was not from this country, that there were problems with his father's behavior, and that he might have to be sent back to where he came from. From what I recall, the beating was so bad that the police were called. I felt sorry for Patrick, and that evening when I went to bed, I prayed that he would be okay. It was the first time I can ever remember praying for anyone. When I was in high school, there was a boy who would stop by the store where I worked and talk to me every day. He would just magically appear. I asked him his name, and he said, Pat. He told me he was from Ireland. I used to ask him how long he had been standing there behind me, and he would just smile. We built up a good friendship over the months until he told me he would not be able to stop by again. When he left that day, I cried. I had a thought come to my mind that I would see him again one day, and that he would be my husband, and this thought comforted me. There were so many other things. A boy with whom I felt a strong connection who would always say hello to me after French class, tapping me as he left the room. One whom I would talk to at a place we called The Wall, whose conversations I enjoyed. I remember in college weekends at the Jersey Shore and a nightclub I went to every weekend. There was a man on stage working with the sound and lights who would stare at me. I thought he was cute, so I smiled and waved. I always felt that someone was watching me there, so I soon stopped going, but I had the strange feeling that I might have blown an opportunity that life would have given me to meet the man on the stage, and that there was something more for us. And then there was the time when my friend mentioned a co-worker named Patrick who had been born in Ireland. Even though my friend assured me it wasn't the boy from my memories, I daydreamed that it was he. I baked banana bread and pumpkin pies for my friend to take to work and share with Patrick. Eventually, I forgot about all of this and married someone else. 30 years after the last time I saw Patrick, he contacted me via the internet and asked to meet up. On the initial meeting, I did not recognize him. He asked if I truly remembered him and looked me in the eyes. I recognized those eyes. It was vaguely coming back. Afterward, he said that we should meet for a real date. When we did, I felt such a connection that it scared me. I strongly felt that he would be my husband, but I was scared as my last relationship had been with a man who had left me. We talked, and I realized it had been him all along. The time with his father, the wall, French class. I asked him about my friend, his co-worker, and it turned out that Patrick was the one with whom he had shared all my cooking. It was also Patrick on the stage at the summer nightclub, doing the sound and lighting. My last day with Patrick was in July 2008. We had a wonderful date, but we were not able to meet up again after that due to our distance. The last week that Patrick and I talked was right before your workshop. He asked me to share my experiences with him when I got back. I also happened to mention that I had asked the doctors to check my heart. That same week, a few minutes before my heart test, I learned that Patrick had died. His own heart had given out. He had fallen down the stairs and had a heart attack either before he fell or somewhere along the way to the bottom of the steps. I never got to say goodbye. Since Patrick has passed on, he has communicated with me. These experiences show me that love never dies. When I was going to meet up with him on our first date, I had asked God to show me a sign when I met the right person. I then saw a shooting star at the same time that the song "Wish You Were Here" by Pink Floyd came on the radio. I took that as a sign and shared it with him. He said, "We're just two lost souls swimming in a fishbowl," which is a lyric from the song. After he died, I asked Patrick to be with me one day as I went to the dentist. I said, "Let me hear that song one more time before I get there." As soon as I pulled into the parking lot of the dentist's office, the song came on. I got goosebumps while listening to it on the radio. I loved it. He was with me. After the appointment, I went home, and as soon as I walked into the house, my daughter came out with a painting she had done of Syd Barrett, a founding member of Pink Floyd. I had never shared my story about Patrick with her, or the meaning of the song to us. Next to the portrait were the words, "We're just two lost souls swimming in a fishbowl." Judy. We are often so tentative with love. We stop, we hesitate, we rationalize, we become afraid, we walk away. But love is not tentative with us. It keeps coming back, trying again, setting up new opportunities. Love is persistent. Love never dies. We hear its songs whenever we stop to listen. We smell our beloved's scents even after they have passed on. We see their messengers, the birds and animals, the sky and other signs. We feel their touch. We receive their signals. We sense their presence. As Pink Floyd said in another song, and as Patrick would undoubtedly tell Judy himself, "I will always be here. I will always look out from behind these eyes. It's only a lifetime. It's only a lifetime." The Split Soul. It is 2001, and I am living with the love of my life. I am breathing love. I am seeing love. I am love. I feel more myself than I ever felt. I feel strong, glamorous, and so fortunate to be perfectly complete. I have the most amazing child and the most incredible man in my life. My family is fine. Because I feel invincible, I am successful. I become a little money-making machine. Life doesn't seem to get more perfect. I discover the deepest secrets of my sexuality, and every cell of my body is sensual. I am happy. I am love. The summer of 2004 comes, and he is gone. He had to choose between living with me, building a life with me and my son here in North America, or moving back to his old country in South America. I need to choose to let him go or choose to keep him. And I have the power to do both. We both know that our love stays the same because there is no time, no past or future. It just is. Years pass by. I can't afford the luxury of getting depressed, so I fight it. My income drops drastically. My savings are paying the monthly bills. I am getting sick. My immune system fights against me. I am becoming desperate. Lying in bed, I have time to think and change my priorities. God is with me. I get back to the day-to-day life, but I am not myself again. I thought that he took away my desire and left me empty. My mind was saying that I had to close the door and forget him. My heart was craving for his touch, and my soul was totally and irrevocably in love with him. Last year I started to let your CDs guide me into my past lives. My past life is linked to my current one, and I understand that. The most unbelievable fact that I had acknowledged while regressing is that, during a life around the year 1850, I saw myself in the body of the man I love in this life. I was he, the man in this life that made me feel complete and perfect, the man that taught me to love myself, and because of this love, I could love the universe. I was he. I am he. Back then I saw him, me, being totally irresponsible, leaving my wife. No reason, just ignorance and selfishness. My wife back then was a dear friend I lost 10 years ago in the current life. She was caring, beautiful, smart, and fun back in that life, the same as she was in this one. When I regressed back to that time again at your conference in Toronto, the experience was so vivid. I saw myself in his body, not caring about anyone but myself. I saw myself dying alone in a railroad station. What did I have to learn? How to be alone and how to be responsible. I did not learn that back then. I feel so much guilt for leaving my wife, my friend. It is hard to express in words. While regressed, my dear friend came to me along with my uncle. They are both gone in this life, and they both came to comfort me, to calm me down. At the conference I was crying, feeling so deeply guilty. I was crying and could not stop. "It's okay. It does not matter. It's fine. Calm down. It is okay." This is what they told me. I am learning my lessons, slowly but surely. I am very responsible in this life. I am raising my son by myself, and I work hard to offer him the world. The man I love, who is me, is responsible now too, back home in his country and raising his own children. We are finally getting it, and we are responsible. And alone. Why alone? Are we a split soul? Violet. Even after their deaths, our loved ones often help and guide us from the other side, from the spiritual dimensions. Violet describes being comforted by her dear friend and by her uncle, both of whom had died. In the regressed state, when our usual mental barriers are relaxed, such helping visits by our spiritual family are more clearly perceived. Real and lasting happiness and joy cannot be dependent on others. Those are inner states. Lovers may leave, but love cannot. It is our real nature. Violet is learning these difficult lessons, and she is finding an inner love that is permanent. Her karma is to feel the effects of her decisions and irresponsibility in the lifetime of the 1850s. The shoe is now on the other foot. Her dear friend, who was the wife back then, has already forgiven her. There is a metaphor in this memory. Was she her lover then? Or was her subconscious showing her the connection to her present life, the karmic debts, and pointing to the lessons to be learned? Perhaps because she was the man who left his wife in the past life, Violet merged the two male identities into one. Further regression could bring defining details, yet the real work is already done. Mark and Kathleen, a husband and wife whose story ends this chapter, describe their own journeys with the work of past life regression. Their experiences have helped them to understand not only each other, but also other significant familial relationships at a much deeper and more empathic level. Regressions of rivalry. In my late teens in this lifetime, I was at first baffled by the fact that my otherwise loving and conscientious mother would always find fault with any of my girlfriends, particularly if she thought that a relationship might become serious. I used to tell her to give the girls a chance. Eventually, I concluded that she probably saw my girlfriends as rivals for her only child's affection. The teen years gave way to the 20s, and at the beginning of a postgraduate academic year's stay in France as an English-language teaching assistant, I met Kathleen. We were both English assistants at two different high schools in the same town. I came from England, Kathleen from the United States. Our relationship did indeed become serious, and we married and decided to make our home in America. The conclusion that I gave at the end of the first paragraph only begins to explain the turbulence that my mother created on occasions during the 16 years from my engagement in 1976 to her death in 1992. We were treated to all manner of manipulations in letters and phone calls, and our visits to England to see her and other family members were punctuated by outbursts of temper, usually for reasons that were clear only to my mother. We soon realized that she was trying to drive a wedge between us. The only way for us was to present a united front, which we did. Indeed, my mother remarked on that, and even though she eventually stopped trying to manipulate our relationship, the outbursts continued. I was able to spend the last 2 weeks of my mother's life with her in the hospital, where she had been admitted because of the late stages of terminal cancer. Just before I arrived, a cancer-induced stroke took away her power of speech, but not her hearing and understanding. Despite all that had happened during the past 16 years, I was grateful just to be able to be present with her during her final days. After my mother's death, Kathleen and I often reminisced about my mother's volatile personality, wishing that our relationship with her might have been more peaceful. 15 years passed. Then we began reading Dr. Weiss's work and using his regression CDs. From the first session, I found it easy to go to past lives. One of my early recollections was of a life in which I was the manager of a large estate in Derbyshire, England, sometime in the 19th century. Imagine my surprise when I realized that my wife in that life was my mother in this lifetime, and that Kathleen was an estate employee, probably a cook or member of the kitchen staff, something that she had been able to confirm in her own regressions. Kathleen and I had felt a strong mutual attraction then, but were unable to go beyond a platonic relationship, as I was married. Subsequent regressions to that lifetime provided more information. I believe that the estate might have been Chatsworth because of an incident that happened in the past life when my wife, my current life mother, and I were shopping in Buxton, the nearest large town to the Chatsworth estate. She and I were in a store when Kathleen and some other estate employees entered. I turned to greet Kathleen and the others, and when I turned back to my wife, there on her face was the same look of annoyance, frustration, and disdain that I'd seen many times on my mother's face in this lifetime, especially after Kathleen and I became engaged. During another regression to that lifetime, that same look was on my wife's face when Kathleen stopped by our house to inquire about my health after I suffered a respiratory illness that eventually led to my death. I had been helping a local farmer at lambing time, had been caught in a heavy rainstorm, and had contracted a cold, which became bronchitis and then pneumonia. Interestingly enough, I suffered from bronchitis on a number of occasions as a child in this lifetime. We certainly have our own evidence that souls do incarnate in groups. Whether Kathleen, my mother, and I have been together in additional lifetimes, we do not know. Before we began past life regression work, we put my mother's reaction to our relationship and marriage down to possessiveness and desire to control. Regressions to that past life, coupled with meditation, reflection, and other spiritual work, have revealed to us how much my mother's reactions were based in fear of losing the person around whom she had built her reality. It would be easy for us to comment that there was no need for her to fear losing her loyal husband in that past life, or her son's love in this life, but her fear was real for her, and it manifested itself as described. We are now able to see her actions and reactions with compassionate understanding. We see her as a wounded soul, and we wish her inner peace and healing. It is fascinating just how many themes and aspects of past lives occur again in present lifetimes. I have visited, in chronological order, lives as the wife of an Indian nobleman, a Roman senator, a European builder in medieval times, a blacksmith, a royalist cavalryman in the English Civil War, a professional court harpsichordist, a mariner, the estate manager, a French female professional theatrical singer, and a young German living in Berlin just before and during most of World War II, the lifetime prior to this one. Architecture and buildings interest me in this lifetime, as does music. I sing as an amateur in recitals and have recently begun learning the piano. I enjoy being at sea, and in fact, Kathleen and I used to give enrichment presentations in maritime history for passengers on cruise ships. In 2 of the presentations, I sang sea shanties. And my profession in this life? Before I retired, I taught French and German at college for 32 years. Although time and effort on my part were needed to learn the two languages, I did not experience any difficulty in learning them to a level of fluency. Past life regression is a valuable tool for personal growth. When accompanied by a karmic connection, it can lead to a deeper spiritual understanding of reality. We are all here to learn, to heal, and to help other souls to do the same. Kathleen and I are profoundly grateful to have had the opportunity to be reconnected as soulmates in this lifetime and to be able to nurture a loving relationship that has been rewarding, fulfilling, and most of all, spiritually energizing. We have found our compass, and that compass is love. Mark and Kathleen. Love triangles are far more complex and enduring than we realize. Present-life mother and daughter-in-law were romantic rivals in the 19th century, and the jealousies from that time were carried over to the current lives. Even though the relationships had changed and the woman who had been Mark's wife reincarnated as his mother, her insecurities persisted. Past life therapy can heal these emotional wounds, and Mark's mother might have benefited if she had had the inclination and the opportunity to experience a regression to that Derbyshire lifetime. Many other emotions and feelings may be carried over from past lives. Anger, love, fear of loss or separation, rivalries, mistrust, concerns about betrayal, affinities, a sense of powerlessness, and overprotectiveness are only some of these. The relationship is repaired when the past life origins of the problem are recalled and released. Then the relationship can be completely fresh, clear, and in the present moment. All the old baggage is discarded. If relationship problems appear to make little sense given the present life determinants, and if the problems seem resistant to reason and correction, these are clues that they may be originating from one or more of your past lives. Our souls are constantly reuniting in order to grow and evolve. To know the past can heal the present and lighten the future. Mark and Kathleen close their story and this chapter with a wonderfully apt metaphor. We have found our compass, they write, and that compass is love. Love is indeed the most exquisite instrument, helping us to navigate the rocky terrain of this earthly plane, guiding us toward the heavens, toward our home. Whenever we become lost in the woods, it reorients us with a gentle touch, realigning us on our path. Its force is magnetic, its wisdom unerring. Love is the device, the direction, and the destination. It points the way, and it is the way. Love is our true nature. Love is our true north.